23. I can see that we have present Councillors Anderson, Barker, Brogan and Brown. I have apologies from Councillor Carmichael, but I can see that Councillor Falconer is in attendance as a substitute. Also present today are Councillors Convery, Corbett, Cowan, Cowie, Devlin and Dewar. Councillor Fagan? Apologies, thank you. I also have apologies for Councillor Ferguson Miller, but I can see that Councillor Shearer is in attendance as a substitute. Also present today is Councillor Gowland. Councillor Horn? No, not seeing you. Councillor Johnson Dempsey is also in attendance, as is Councillor Kerr. Councillor Lennon? No. Councillor Lockhart? Not seeing you either. Also present today are Councillors MacDonald, McCallan, McCreary, McLachlan. I have apologies from Councillor Nugent. Councillor Toner? Apologies, thank you. And also in attendance today is Councillor Watson. We also have a number of officers present, and with that I'll pass you back to the Chair to commence today's business. Thanks, Chair.
Press the button. Item 1, declaration of interest. Any declarations of interest? I don't see any. Item 2, minutes of the previous meeting. That's pages 5 to 16. Black mark to the Deputy Chair. First of all, can I move the minutes of the meeting as a correct record?
Oh, I've got Councillor Anderson.
Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, just on page 14, item 14, the White Moss tennis courts. I haven't seen any sort of information that's come back from the discussion we had. So is there a timeline for receiving information on the issues that was raised at our last meeting?
Sorry? Alison Wright.
Thank you, Councillor. We're still working through elements of that, but I will get even an interim response to you this week and follow up on the remaining points shortly thereafter, if that's okay.
Okay. Can we then approve the minutes of the last meeting? Thank you very much. Item 3 is the Community Enterprise Resources Revenue Budget Monitoring Statement 2023-24, pages 17 to 24. Can I ask Louise Harvey to present that report, please?
Thank you, Chair. So this is the second report for committee for the financial year 23-24, covering the revenue budget for the period 1st of April through to the 8th of September, which is period 6 of our financial year. So a standard report for committee this period, almost halfway through the year, and section 5 on page 17 outlines the main financial implications of the report. At paragraph 5.1, Community and Enterprise is reporting a break-even position against the phased budget. Variance explanations are outlined in Appendix B through to F for each individual service area, and in the main we have underspends in our employee costs across most service areas, and these are supporting costs of transport and an under-recovery in our school meals income and also parking income. There are additional costs in supplies and services due to the cost of food and price of food in relation to school meals. We do have minor overspends in property costs due to depot costs within our road service, additional costs within admin across all services due to medical costs, and there's an additional cost for clinical waste, but this is fully recovered within income recharges. Budget variants are proposed as set out at the bottom of the appendices B3 through to F, and again these reflect updates to the Community and Enterprise budget since we last reported, covering the period 14th of July through to the 8th of September, and in the main they cover the following main areas: transfers of budget for capital funded from revenue, budget realignments to reflect how we deliver our services within our street service, transfers from reserves to meet our expenditure commitments, and in the main the creation of budget to reflect external income and funds supporting programmes that we are delivering. If I can refer committee back to paragraph 2, the committee is asked to approve the following recommendations: that the break-even position on the Community and Enterprise budget as detailed in Appendix A of the report be noted, and that the proposed budget variants are approved. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Louise. I think there's some familiar themes there, isn't there, to do with the recruitment issues and things like that. Any questions on that report? Don't see any questions. Thank you much. Can we approve the report?
Great.
Thank you. That moves on to item 4, which is the Community Enterprise Resource Capital Budget, the Monitoring Statement 23-24, pages 25 to 28. And Lorraine O'Hagan in this instance, please. Lorraine.
Thanks, Chair. Good afternoon, members. Agenda item 4 then on page 25 is the Standard Capital Budget Monitoring Report. It's the second for the current financial year and it reflects the budget and spend position to the 8th of September, which is our accounting period 6. Section 3 gives you the background to the report and explains how the budget includes amendments which were approved by the Executive Committee in both September and October this year, and it gives us a revised budget for the year of £39.602 million. Section 5 details the financial implications then and highlights the budget for the year of 39.602. It also notes that this is a net decrease of 3.3 million since the last report to the committee, and that reflects the adjustments that were approved by the Executive Committee, as I said, over the past couple of months. The details of those adjustments are in Appendix A to your paper on page 28. In terms of the position at period 6, section 5.3 notes the anticipated spend was 8.220 million and spend to the 8th of September amounts to 8.323 million. So we are actually 100,000 or so ahead of profile at that point in time, and that reflects the timing of project expenditure only. If I can refer committee then back to the recommendations in section 2 and ask that the committee approves or notes, the Community and Enterprise Resources Capital Programme of 39.602 million and the spend to date of 8.323 million. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Any questions on that one? Councillor Watson.
Thanks, Chair. It's not, I know this is going through the Executive Committee, but there's 2 issues that are referred to there, the Hairmyres Park and Ride and Stewartfield Way, which are 2 major capital programmes that are taking part in the area. When are we likely to see an update reported to committee regarding progress and what the latest position is regarding both of these projects? Thanks, Chair.
Who's going to reply on that one? Lorraine? Colin.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of Hairmyres, you maybe recollect a couple of months ago, Scottish Ministers announced the rail line works were scheduled for completion in December 25. Since that time, we've been working through a number of public events for our element of that in terms of the Park and Ride. I know, Councillor Watson, you've certainly attended one of those. So we're actually, Dave and I are meeting colleagues from Transport Scotland tomorrow and Network Rail just to kind of firm up on programme. There's certainly nothing formal scheduled to come to committee anytime soon on that one, but certainly once we get a clearer shape of what our programme looks like, and what Network Rail's programme looks like, we can maybe schedule something in for early 24, or we'll report it via the service plan and capital monitoring as well. In terms of Stewartfield Way, that's obviously a much larger project, and you'll see some slippage there. I think it was 3 million was scheduled for this year, but that's just not been possible. So again, myself and kind of Alison are meeting not next week, the following week, just to see where we are with that project. You might have recollected again in the service plan, we talked about reviewing the programme there, refining the project. What does it look like? What did it look like when we reported to committee in March 20, just before COVID, and what does it look like now? So that's clearly a project that's under significant financial pressures given the increase in capital infrastructure costs. So we're just dusting it down, looking at what the benefits were, look what the benefits can still be, and just to make sure that the project still meets what those objectives were at the start. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. David?
I take on board what you're saying and the issues around that, but there's a lot of periphery issues around about Stewartfield Way in particular, from the environment and in that Stewartfield area. But when are we actually going to take a decision on this and what's going, and when is it actually going to happen? Because it's been kicking now about for a number of years and it just keeps getting pushed further back and further back. If we're not going to do it, we should decide we're not going to do it, or if we're going to do some of it, let's get that on the table and get it underway, because it's dragging on, and it's our impact in other parts of the Shortfield area. Thanks.
Colin?
That's the agenda for next week's meeting, exactly, for us to look at what does the project look like. We do intend to progress with the bulk of the project that's already been out there in terms of the kind of dualling at the northeast corner, working through the improvements that we've presented already there. But it's just, what's the cost of those? Are we going to deliver it in a winner? Are we going to phase it? Can we still afford all of that? In terms of what we programmed previously. So those points that you made, Councillor Watson, are all valid and are the exact answers we're looking to shape in the coming weeks and months. I expect spring, summer next year that we will have a more developed outline business case. I think we went with an updated strategic business case in June 21. Lots happened since then, in particular costs have increased. So all those answers, I think, will be captured in the outline business case in spring next year. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. It's obviously it's an ongoing issue of some concern, I think, to local members on that one, but we'll keep an eye on that one. Can I therefore move the report, if no one else has got anything else to ask? Can we agree the report? Thank you very much. Moving on to item 5, the Workforce Monitoring Statement, July and August 2023, pages 29 to 36. Elaine Maxwell. Elaine.
Thank you, Chair. This is a standard workforce monitoring report, and the purpose is to provide committee with an update on the employment information for the period of July to August 2023 for the resource. Members will see at 4.1, the resource absence figure for August 23 was 4.9%, and although that represents an increase of 0.6 when compared to the previous month of July, July obviously was 4.3, and the last time that we saw levels like that were back in 2021, July 2021, when the figure was the same as the August figure here at 4.9. Looking at our August figure this year, in comparison to August of last year, the figure has decreased by 1.4%, although our figures at August are 0.8% higher than the council-wide figure. When we look, as we always do, in terms of the projected annual average, the resource figure for the year 23-24 is 6.5%, comparing to the council-wide figure of 5.5%. I think members will be able to see that there have been a lot of activity within the managing of our absence levels, and actually that's reflective on the way that the figures are demonstrated for this the last 2 months here. Moving on to section 4.2, in respect of occupational health information, you'll see that there were 222 occupational health referrals made during the period, which is down 10 when we look at the same period last year. If you look at Appendix 2, you will see that's predominantly around, there was a reduction in actual medical examinations, but we can see there was quite a bit of an increase within physiotherapy referrals, and a slight increase in terms of our referrals to our employee support service as well, which may be a reflection on we've done a relaunch in terms of our employee assistance programme, so hopefully that's perhaps been one of the benefits there. Moving on to section 4.3, in terms of our accidents and incident statistics, you'll see that there were 34 accidents recorded within the resource for the period, and representing a small increase of 3 when looking at the same period of last year. And again, we just emphasise that we continue to monitor any incidents that are being reported. Section 4.4 reflects employee relations activity within the resource, and you'll see that there were 12 disciplinary hearings held during the period recorded, 1 grievance hearing with no dignity at works. There are 2 appeal hearings pending for the appeals panel during this period, and 1 appeal was withdrawn during the time. Section 4.5 outlines the analysis of leavers, and you'll see that there were 37 during this period eligible for an exit interview, with 4 exit interviews being taken place. It also details that at 4.7 that there were 92 employees left the resource, and managers have indicated that 88 posts are being replaced, 2 ended due to the end of a fixed term contract, and 2 posts have been held pending service reviews. Section 5 of the report outlines the staffing watch, which was recorded as at June of this year, and you'll see there was an increase of 123 in the numbers from between March and June, and that's primarily relating to seasonal intake at that point in time. And with that, I would refer committee back to the recommendations at Section 2 within the report to employment information for July and August 2023. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Elaine. I think perhaps committee will agree that's quite an encouraging report in terms of the absence figures and so forth, where there's been a fairly steady improvement, I think, over the period. Difficult to have the comparison with the COVID thing before, but now we're coming into comparative figures. So I think congratulations to everyone concerned for that. That's very helpful, particularly against the staffing recruitment problems. It's quite important, obviously, that we get as many people who are on our complement, if you like, out and available to work. And that, I think, is having an impact. So thank you very much to everyone concerned for that. Any questions on that one? Councillor Andrea Cowan. Andrea.
Thanks. Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Elaine, for the report. And as Robert says, it is very encouraging. I just wanted to look, the increase in referrals to employee support officers has gone up 11 from 50 to 61, which I think is very encouraging. And I hear you say that you've relaunched that service to your employees, which is excellent. I just wondered if that is also the reason that more employees have taken up the counselling service. Again, I think that's a positive, and I just wondered if there was a promotion behind that as well, just out of interest, Elaine. Thank you.
Elaine, can you say anything about that?
Yeah, hopefully the relaunch of our employee assistance programme has gone some way, Councillor Cowan, in promoting the services that are there and making sure that it's at the forefront of not only for our employees but reminding our managers. And we've done quite a bit of work with our trade union partners as well in terms of encouraging that. At the same time, we have been participating and looking at different training sessions that we can, again, jointly with our managers, with our trade unions, around mental health awareness, and a number of other activities that we've done, and certainly managers from Community and Enterprise Resources have been at the forefront of some of those training opportunities that we've had. So hopefully all of that has certainly shown an increase within there, certainly through the maximising attendance policy, through our managers meeting with their employees, that that's the first thing. If you've got employees that go off with that kind of absence, that you're encouraging them to participate and take that offer up, because it's a valuable service that we have for our employees. So hopefully all of that sees that improvement, and I would hope perhaps members would see that same pattern across some of the other resources as well.
That's great. Thanks. It looks like you're doing a good job. Thank you.
Thanks very much. It's a balance, isn't it, between a number of different levers on these sort of things, which does the thing. But a happy workforce is always quite important in this regard. Any other questions on that one? Don't think so, in which case can I move the report?
I'll second it.
And are we agreed on the report? Thank you very much. Now, moving on to item 6, the most important item on the agenda, I think, the Rutherglen Town Centre Strategy and Action Plan, pages 37 to 54. Can I invite Alison Brown to speak to this one?
Thank you, Chair. This report informs committee of the work undertaken to prepare the consultative draft Rutherglen Town Centre Strategy and Action Plan. The strategy seeks to engage with the local businesses and the community to create a dynamic action plan to tackle issues within the town centre. Town centres more generally are in a transition stage, facing a broad range of complex issues, including economic downturn, COVID and online shopping. That said, Rutherglen is performing better than some towns within South Lanarkshire. The future of town centres can no longer only support a heavy reliance on retail, but instead support a wide range of uses. And again, Rutherglen does support a range of uses, including local services, cafes, an evening economy and town centre living. The strategy and action plan, as set out in Appendix 1, sets a range of initiatives which the Council will pursue with partners. The private sector has a key role to play in this by strengthening links with the local businesses and the community. The strategy aligns with the work of Scotland's Towns Partnership, and it's also been influenced by a place and wellbeing assessment. It's also worth highlighting that in 2026, marks the 900th anniversary of the Charter of the Royal Borough of Rutherglen, and the Strategy and Action Plan will support the programme of community events leading up to and during that time. Subject to approval, the draft Strategy and Action Plan will be published and made available for consultation during February and March, and a finalised plan will be presented to committee in June 2024. So with that, I just turn back to the recommendations set out in paragraph 2.1 and ask a committee to approve the consultative draft strategy and action plan and approve the arrangements for the consultation. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Alison. Could I say that I watched this morning myself a thing to do with culture and planning. There's a webinar thing with a number of examples from this, mostly from the south of England, Midlands and south of England, from Chester, from Folkestone in particular. But it was very interesting to see the actual links that there were being made between cultural activities in town centres and economic regeneration of the area as well. I wonder if I could begin, if I may, taking the chair's prerogative here, by asking Alice, if I may, there's a reference, I think, in the report to cultural issues, how far that you think is capable of being taken as part of the town centre report.
Yeah, thank you. Rutherglen has a number of fairly significant cultural assets, and I think we could be doing somewhat more to promote those and encourage greater use of those, both with community groups but by the business community as well. So with ourselves and with colleagues in South Lanarkshire Leisure and Culture, I think that's a real area that we could look to explore and possibly enhance over the coming years.
Thanks very much indeed. Could I welcome the report? Because could I also say, if I may, that just to confirm the point about the setting up of the cross-party group, cross-party and community group, I should say, rather than 900, to take forward this from the point of view of the local community. I think it's important there should be that community focus on the thing as well. And my colleagues that represent Rutherglen wards here are involved in that aspect as well. Now, questions on the report. Could I go first of all to Andrea Cowan?
Thanks again, Chair. So yeah, I just really wanted to welcome this. It's obviously very welcome in the area. The Cambuslang plan has improved Cambuslang Main Street. I think everybody would agree. There's obviously still some work to be done, but there have been big improvements in Cambuslang. And Rutherglen, I think, obviously being biased like the Chair, I think that Rutherglen starts in a very good position. And look forward to being involved in the Rutherglen 900 celebrations and getting stuck into the sort of steering group activities. And just tongue-in-cheek, but if I could just draw everyone's attention to page 42 under the approach. It says the purpose of this action plan is to propose a long-term shared vision for Rutherglen Cowan Centre. So thank you very much for the offer of naming the plan after myself, but I think that's a typo and it probably should say town.
David, do you want to reply to that?
Thank you very much. Yeah,
was that your idea, David? Was that your input? Thank you.
Yeah, so we noticed there's an A missing, so there is a typo in the... No, yeah, sorry, apologies for that, should be town.
Sorry. Thank you.
It's fair to say, isn't it, that these town centre plans, although focused on the town centre, they've also got ramifications for the surrounding communities as well. There's one thing I wanted to ask about, the feasibility works that are talked about under the Greener, Cleaner Town Centre on page 51. Alison, I wonder if you could expand on that a little bit. It talks about the council aiming to carry out design feasibility works to ascertain how the town centre could contribute to the ambitions of the scheme. Can you say anything more about that?
Yeah, there's a real opportunity to do some work with Climate Forest, where they are looking for sites across South Lanarkshire and beyond for some tree planting and some biodiversity work. So that's just one area of activity that we're keen to try and identify sites. But there's other areas around air quality and litter, etc., that there's opportunities to try and already sort of expand the work that's already been undertaken in these areas over recent years.
Thanks very much. Any other questions or comments on that? Thank you. I've got to say, I think it's a very well-timed report because of the 2026 anniversary coming up, and I'm looking for great things off it. So could I, first of all, move the report?
I'll second it.
And ask the committee to agree the report. Thank you very much. Okay, now moving on to our competitor areas in Lanark, in this instance. Item 7, Discover Lanark Business Improvement District Renewal Ballot, pages 55 to 78. Also a very important issue, actually. Could I ask in this instance, again, I think it's Alison to speak to that one, isn't it?
Thank you, Chair. This report requests approval to support the business proposals prepared by Discover Lanark Business Improvement District for the period September 2024 to August 2029. The Executive Committee originally approved the Council's support for Discover Lanark bid in December 2018. Discover Lanark represents the businesses in a defined area of the town and delivers a series of initiatives. The bid is established through a ballot process and, if successful, runs for a 5-year period. It is funded by a levy from the businesses, which is collected on their behalf by the Council. Since its establishment in February 2019, the bid has delivered a variety of projects, including Jurassic Lanark, the Classic Car event and various Christmas events. The bid now seeks renewal through the ballot process to secure a second term to August 2029. The business plan is attached in Appendix 1, which sets out the proposed projects, the bid area and the levy. The Council has an important role to play in supporting this work alongside Discover Lanark, and to ensure that the projects and initiatives are complementary and benefit the wider town. Specifically, the Council will support the bid by voting in favour of the bid in the ballot for each of its own council properties, continue to provide officer support, manage the ballot process, continue to collect the bid levy and provide 2 elected members to sit on the bid board. Therefore, I take you back to the recommendation as set out in 2.1, and that committee is asked to approve support for the bid as set out in the business plan, and that the Council continues to actively support the bid through a range of measures. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Alison. I think that's a very impressive report, actually, with a lot of good activities that have taken place in Lanark, and linked, if I may say so, to the item we approved not too long ago to do with the improvement in air quality. The whole thing, these things all begin to go together. Any questions on the report? Don't see any. Can I therefore move the report?
I'll second it.
Can we approve the report? Thank you very much. Moving on to item 8. That's the approval of South Lanarkshire Council's food service plan for 23-24, pages 79 to 108. Fraser Carlin, can I ask Fraser to speak?
So Craig Brown's now going to speak.
Oh, Craig Brown, sorry, yes.
Okay. Sorry, committee. The purpose of this report is to seek approval for the 2023-24 food service plan. This is required by the codes of practice covering the delivery of official food controls by Scottish local authorities. Section 3 of the report sets out the statutory background for the food service plan, and in Section 4 we discuss this year's plan, and it notes that a draft has already been submitted to Food Standards Scotland earlier in the year, and they have indicated that they have no concerns regarding the plan that's before you today. Food Standards Scotland has requested a copy of the final plan once it's been approved. The plan is available in Appendix 1 of the report, which is at pages 83 to 107 to your pack. The only change that has been made to the draft that is sent to Food Standards Scotland is to update the establishment for environmental health following successful recruitment over the summer period. I would refer committee to Section 2 and ask you to approve the plan and to note that the food service plan will continue to be reported to committee annually. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Craig. Sorry, the difficulties in starting you off there. Any questions on that report? I did note some quite interesting statistics, by the way, on page 89 relating to the different types of premises. And there was a couple of things I think worthy of note. One was the number of butchers and bakers that still survive or have been revived across the area. And the other was the balance between pubs providing food and pubs not serving food, which has been an interest of licensing boards across the area too, hasn't it? Okay, can we approve the report? Can I move the report?
Second it.
Thank you very much indeed. Moving on to item 9. That's the Community Benefit Funds Renewable Energy Fund grant applications, pages 109 to 112, and Alison Brown again to speak to that one.
Thank you. This report considers a grant application to the Auchropert Wind Farm Renewable Energy Fund from Colburn Regeneration Group. Since 2004, the Council has been collecting and administrating community benefits from wind farm developers. Grant awards above 20,000 require committee approval. Colburn Regeneration Group are seeking a grant award of 58,354 against a project value of just over 78,000 for the installation of 15 lighting columns within the village green. This will enhance the community space, improve safety and encourage the space to be fully utilised. The project will be managed by Roads, Transportation and Fleet Services and will be delivered in December 2023. The balance of the funding for the project from Hagshaw Community Fund and Can-Do Community Fund is currently being finalised. Therefore, I'd ask that committee approve the grant award of 58,354 to Colburn Regeneration Group. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Alison. Can I ask for questions and come to Councillor Ross Gowland? Ross.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've met the Regeneration Group a couple of times, so congratulations for the group for getting the funds for the lights on the village green, which was previously approved by planning. Can I ask, will the money just be spent on that project with the lights, or will it be spent on anything else within Colburn? Because I see in the papers that I've got a few ideas about different projects. Do I have that information at hand?
Alison?
The 58,000 is specifically for the lighting project. The group do have other ideas in the pipeline, and those are at sort of pre-development stage, but the grant award in front of you is for the lighting.
Okay, Ross? Yep, thank you very much. Any other questions on that report? Can I move the report?
I'll second it.
Can we approve the report? Thank you very much. Now, another important item, item 10, is the pavement parking report, pages 113 to 118. Colin Park. Colin.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to provide an update on the progression of the national ban on pavement parking, double parking and parking at drop curbs regulations. Section 3 sets out the background to the Act, and the key elements are set out at paragraph 3.2. Paragraph 3.4 notes that the duty that means that a council must comply with the requirements of any relevant legislation. However, a statutory power, as is the case with this one, means the council has discretion whether to exercise the power. Services across the council have many powers to manage and deliver services, all of which are done so in full consideration of the available resources and commensurate with other priorities. Section 4 of the report goes into a little bit of detail about how we presently enforce across the council, and also touches upon at paragraph 4.7, consistency across Scotland in terms of implementation and other councils' ability to enforce parking legislation. The report notes that it's likely to be spring-summer 24 before local authorities can effectively and robustly undertake any enforcement. And at paragraph 4.8, importantly, it does note that Transport Scotland are aware and accept that not all local authorities will have the capabilities to undertake enforcement from day one. Does that sound okay? I'm just conscious of a bit of feedback as well. We understand a national awareness campaign will focus on the effects of pavement parking, and will highlight that there may be a possibility of a penalty from the 11th of December 2023 when the final elements of the regulations are laid before Parliament. Section 5 notes the level of consultation that has been undertaken, and whilst progress has been made, a complete guidance document is not yet available, and chapters issued by Transport Scotland have been done so as and when they're readily available. This approach has made it difficult to fully assess the implications of the legislation and to understand the operational, technical and management considerations in order to enforce. Guidance is still awaited, in particular in relation to the process of issuing and enforcing PCN notices, and this is not expected until the 11th of December as well. Section 6 sets out again the key elements of this paper. Members should be aware that available guidance is under review, and a more comprehensive assessment of locations that could be considered for exemptions has been undertaken. While in theory the Council could potentially commence enforcement of the national ban on parking in December 2023 is not presently proposed to do so, and it's understood that many councils across Scotland are in the same position and are choosing to do that as well. Paragraph 6.3 notes the key provisions of this Act and that they're well intended and cannot be disputed or challenged in terms of seeking to improve road safety and accessibility. However, the implementation and enforcement must be done in a balanced, proportionate and pragmatic way so as to ensure our communities, town centres and businesses are not adversely affected. Many locations across our network have a level of car ownership that's higher than the level of parking that's available in residential areas, and at times the only way to ensure safe access and egress may be to allow a modest element of footway parking. A location like this required to be assessed and considered for exemption when compared against certain geometric parameters and characteristics which form part of the assessment. It's clear that the implementation of these powers, should councils choose to do so, will prove very challenging across Scotland, and even within South Lanarkshire, who do have a well-established parking team and enforcement regime in place, will have our challenges. As a result, in paragraph 6.5, we intend to adopt a low-key, soft approach to ensure any enforcement action undertaken is commensurate with the resources available and fully considers the impacts and or displacement that would be experienced across our towns, villages or within residential areas. The full parking standards guidance will be considered, evidence will be gathered from the assessment underway, further intelligence will be gathered on the ground, and any response will also consider the use of advisory warning notices as necessary in the first instance. Sections 7 and 8 note employee and financial recommendations respectively, and other implications including climate change, other and equality impact assessments are covered in the remaining sections. Turning back to the recommendations, committee is asked to approve the following. The contents of the report be noted, specifically the enforcement powers expected to be granted conveyed to councils this year, and they be noted that a soft approach to any resulting enforcement, as detailed at paragraph 6.5, will be undertaken, and a further update will be brought to committee at an appropriate point during 2024. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Colin. This is by way really of an interim report in a way, given the kind of stage we're at on all of this, and I think Colin, in the usual restrained language of an official, has understated, if anything, the difficulties of this legislation. Nobody could disagree with the aim, as he said, but it's very difficult to see how, with the resources we've got, this is going to be very easily enforced if it comes into practice. Could I see there's a number of questions. I suspect they may echo some of those thoughts. Councillor McLachlan, David McLachlan, please. Online.
Thank you, Chair. And your comments there about understating it, yeah, I take that on board, because the comments and questions that I have for Colin, we'll touch on that, I hope. So enforcement is going to be an issue, Colin, as you spoke about, and given that we just recently increased the charge for indiscriminate parking and illegal parking and so on, it was noted even at the time we made that increase, the resource that provides the attendance and covers that, the amount, the revenue they create doesn't actually, it doesn't make it profitable, so there's still a cost to the council to provide parking attendance. Now, if we're going to be able to enforce this, I suspect we would need to increase the amount of parking attendance that we've got, depending on how much of this we're going to actually try and enforce. So I'd like you to comment on that, but I've got another point. You mentioned that leaving the pavements partially available or partially parking on the pavements to allow access. That's quite a grey area. There's no criticism here, but I'm just curious how you would measure that, and if you were able to do that, are you talking about some sort of markings on the pavements where there is areas where you could park in the pavement and still leave? Because I know that sometimes the footways are quite wide, and if somebody's on the pavement, it doesn't really restrict someone with a pram or a wheelchair or something like that. Because the main problem the main complaints that I get is where people have got mobility issues and they're using wheelchairs, etc. They're having to go onto the road to get past some of these parked cars. So if you don't mind, Colin, if you could address those 2 points, please. Thanks, Chair.
Colin?
Thank you, Chair. Just kind of picking up on both those points, Councillor McLachlan. In terms of the number of PAs, we're currently running with about 4 or 5 vacancies, of which we hope to fill at least 2 or 3 of those, and we're actually looking at kind of varying what would have been their traditional hours to allow them to do some increased enforcement perhaps in the evening, weekends as well. At this moment in time, we don't have a handle on what the impacts are going to be just now, so it may be that if it does begin to, I think we need to important, this is not a money generating activity. You know, this is there to keep footpaths clear, to keep our communities moving, keep our town centres moving. If, as a result of that, there is a level of enforcement that's undertaken to deal with any offences, and there is a level of income generated, we will consider whether we want to or we have to increase the number of PAs. As you'll note from the financial section, the parking unit is currently running at a loss of about 760,000, which we're managing through some continuing COVID support, some allocated underspends from other areas of the service. So we're working through that. So points all well taken. We don't have all the answers just now, but we've certainly got the questions. In terms of your last point, the legislation, as I noted, we don't have all the guidance. But currently, actually, within the traffic signs manual, there is signage and there's markings that would allow us to proactively mark on carriageways and on footways where you should park, and that could be half on the carriageway, half on the footpath. Some of the guidance that's already emerged goes into a lot of detail, and it gives us, you know, I couldn't quote today, but it says if there's 1 point whatever metres of footpath available, that's okay over a set distance, because somebody could get by with a pram, but that's short distance or narrow footway over a kilometre or something like that wouldn't be acceptable. So these are the things that we're having to consider. But for those of you who are familiar with some of the parking areas in East Kilbride or elsewhere, you can understand how challenging that's going to be in terms of how we can or can't enforce it.
Colin, for the avoidance of doubt, do the fines for these sort of things come into the council? And is there yet any suggestion of funding from the Scottish Government to support this?
They do. They will all come into the council. There is certainly, this is obviously a new act, new piece of legislation, so there is an accompanying financial memorandum that will allow us, I think, where we can demonstrate increased cost, we will be able to recover that. I think the paper also notes, I've taken it off my screen just now, there was about 140,000 given to South Lanarkshire to allow us to do some preparatory work, some assessments. But it's just the practicality of implementing it, and I'm sure each member today can probably see a positive way of implementing it to deal with some inquiries, but I think the biggest issue I would have is that displacement, because we might deal with parking in one particular area, but we'll just be moving it around the corner to another area. That's not to say we shouldn't do it, and that's what we need to kind of continue to balance up as we learn from what's going to happen in the next year or so. Thank you, Chair.
Can I get a supplementary, please, Chair?
Yes, come back, David.
Yeah, Colin, you're absolutely spot on. There's a risk that if you move people from one area, if you stop them for parking, it's going to move them to somewhere. But this is where there's a balance needs to be struck, and where officials working with local councillors and potentially a consultation process, as you mentioned, where the public could be involved as well. But the point I wanted to come back to you about the point about the finance of it. I mean, I remember when we discussed a previous community enterprise where we increased the fines for the parking, and it hadn't been increased for such a long time, and that was noted. But that was the point I was actually trying to make, Colin. Already, the resource, even with the increased fines, there's no profit. Now, we're not here to make profit, but I don't agree that we should be running at a loss, because if people are doing something wrong and there's a penalty for that, the council shouldn't be picking up a cost to run that service. That should pay for itself. Now, that might sound a little bit draconian, because I know that some members did have concerns about the increase already, but I'm quite comfortable, and I just wonder how other people might feel about it. I'm certainly quite comfortable that the fines should reflect the cost of running the service, because at the end of the day, the parking attendants are doing a job, and it's for the protection and the convenience of our constituents. So that shouldn't run at a loss, Chair. With the greatest respect, I think that a service like this should be at least washing its face, not necessarily making a profit, but covering its costs, and that way we could have adequate resources to put people into these positions where, if we're going to need more people, more staff to police this, if you like, where we do, when we do eventually, if we eventually bring this legislation to force, where we're going to restrict parking on the pavements. And I would quite like to hear a comment back on that, Chair, just on the comment I made about the finance.
Okay, Colin, do you want to come back on that? I mean, it sounds to me there's scope for making lots of money off this, isn't there? Not to beat about the bush.
There is, I think there is and there isn't. I think Councillor McClarkin's point's more than well made there. As we said, we're currently running at a loss of about 760,000. We have mechanisms to manage that this year. The increase in the penalty charge notices, which were approved at Exec Committee a few committees ago, they came in force on Monday there. So that will at least give us a flavour of what, how much that's deterred people from parking illegally, and what level of income we could expect for those that continue to do so. So again, I would like to think that will bring in an amount that will reduce that overspend by hopefully a few hundred thousand, if not more. I would agree, Councillor McLachlan, that this shouldn't be running at a loss. And prior to COVID, we were, I'm sure Louise will probably come in here if I'm wrong, we were sometimes maybe 30, 40 odd thousand under, or a little bit over, and we just managed that at kind of year end. We haven't recovered from COVID. Our town centres haven't got back to what they were in terms of parking. People are hybrid working still, so people are not buying season tickets as much as well. So probably this, the last half of this year, I would say, is a good recovery year for us to understand what does the penalty charge notice increase mean. What does the town centres look like? Alison's obviously bringing forward a whole load of town centre regeneration ideas. That itself, balanced with a level of effective parking enforcement, should hopefully reduce that amount back to perhaps, Councillor McLachlan, something a bit more similar to what it was pre-COVID. But there is a big gap just now, which we're having to work through. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thanks very much on that. Councillor Anderson, John.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Bearing in mind the object of this Act is really to assist those on the footpaths, maybe people with visual impairments, mobility issues, people with prams. So, can I ask, what does the Softly approach look like? And if we are going to take the cars off the pavements, would some of the areas benefit from one-way systems, which would help alleviate some of the problems with the cars all parked on the road? Thanks.
Colin?
Thanks, Chair. Again, kind of very valid point. What does a soft key enforcement look like? I don't know yet. What I know is that we've got powers to tackle it, and we need to consider what that displacement would be if we move, if we go in and enforce an area. If you think of the Murray and East Kilbride, which is an area I know relatively well, I remember looking at that back in the late 90s when we brought in the controlled parking zones, and when we had to positively mark where people could park safely. We reduced the parking by about 50% because you could only, you couldn't mark it right next to a junction. You had to give so much space. So some of these areas, the communities have found a good balance. They know some people park up on a footpath. That's not to say it's correct, and it does impact upon people with prams and other impairments. So we'll consider a number of outcomes once we've assessed an area. One-way systems are always ones for areas like the Murray that we have considered, but there's always a danger with that. When you make a one-way system in place, you can increase vehicle speeds. Parked cars are kind of an unofficial form of traffic calming at times, and sometimes again communities work relatively well. So over the next 6 months, we will be responding to either councillors' inquiries, or no doubt, if Transport Scotland do a publicity campaign, that will generate a level of inquiry from the public as well. And we'll just assess what an area looks like and what's right for that area. There's no one size fits all here, and I think we just need to do that soft, low-key approach in the short term. Gather intelligence from members, gather intelligence from our communities as well, and from across Scotland. So, thank you, Chair.
I think the bottom line is we want to make this actually something that works. If it's going to come in, it's got to have to work. So there's got to be an element of either area consideration or perhaps priority areas within it, which I don't think, to be fair, the legislation readily allows for, if you like. So one of these things, and of course it's very resource intensive, isn't it? Councillor Gowland, Ross.
Thanks. I welcome the report. I have a couple of casework issues concerning pavement parking, and many of our schemes in places like Lesmahago and Kirkby Hill are not built for cars, so there's a real serious issue of residents parking. But we also don't want to punish residents for actually parking near the house. I mean, I have issues of pavements being just totally blocked, and there's people with mobility issues who have a lot of problems just walking in their own street or in their own neighbourhood. So I'm concerned about enforcement, that we enforce it right. I think it's right that we do, if people break the law, if people are parking in places where they shouldn't be, we should be fining them and fining them a fair amount. But so I think it's good that we've got the powers coming up in the spring to actually do something about it. But I would hope that we do put out a good promotional campaign about it, and actually it might actually encourage people to actually think seriously, because actually we've spoke a little bit about moving the issue in other places. I mean, short of actually building car parks in some places, there's not a lot of places where people can go to park, you see, in certain areas. So thank you.
Thanks very much. I don't think that needs any further comment on that one, but very welcome all the same. Councillor Watson. David.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for the report, Colin. I think with this type of report, it builds up an expectation in our communities, and my concern is that we're bringing this forward, and with the government talking about it a long while ago, people are expecting some answers and some action. And I think from the negative side of this report, we're going to struggle to do that. My own experience, I mean, it's about making pavements safer, footways safer, and as a new grandparent, I've encountered problems out with a pram. I know people that have got problems with wheelchairs, and as Councillor Anderson says, you've got folk with visual impairment that are encountering problems. There's problems round about our schools every day about safety with parents that are walking our kids walking to school and can't get walking on the pavements properly because of cars double parked. And I think in my own experience as well that there's a bigger issue in the streets now than there ever was with commercial vehicles parking since COVID. Folk are taking vans home and bigger commercial vehicles and leaving them bumped up in the streets at junctions, and my own experience of it to engage with Police Scotland on that, and to be fair, they've done what they could and they have displaced it. We've maybe not got the same powers as Police Scotland to do some of that though. And probably my question is about how are we going to, can we tie in with Police Scotland to maybe alleviate problem areas, because we're not going to alleviate this completely. And I think the message needs to get there that we are going to enforce it where we can, and that there will be hefty fines. And if that means that the fines need to be higher from the point of view of recovering how much it costs us, then so be it. But the streets need to be made safer for pedestrians, quite frankly. So, thanks.
Colin, do you want to make any comment on that? There's some interesting points there, wasn't there?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Again, all valid. I think you need to remember Police Scotland have very similar powers just now to do this, albeit there's a grey area that they need to see the vehicle driving. You know, so it's not illegal to park in the footway, but it's illegal to drive in the footway, and you can't just get there by appearing overnight. And there's also issues about if at the time of enforcement it was causing an obstruction or not. So I've heard stories about, you know, somebody phoning about somebody's parking the footway across somebody's driveway, but they weren't wanting to get out at that moment in time, so police can't do enforcement. So essentially what this Act will do, will give the councils those powers to enforce. So as much as we will probably engage with the police and make them aware of what's happening, this almost takes those powers that the police couldn't probably fully resource and enforce and passes them to us, and just gives us a bit of a challenge there as well. For the voice any doubt though, I know you'd said, you know, the reports may be negative. This is a good tool in our toolkit to tackle some areas, but we're just exercising a degree of caution about implementing it in a pragmatic way. I think there are some areas where clearly people have a choice, but they've been lazy, and if I can be blunt, they're parking up in their footways and they're not going to park in a proper parking area. If those parking areas are there, this Act should push them into those parking areas and make it safer. There are other areas in the guidance that's coming out acknowledges that, where people don't have a choice. You know, kind of smaller, kind of medieval, not medieval villages, historic villages, town centres, where there is no other choice. Some of the areas in East Kilbride as well, the Murray, etc., that type of location, they don't have a choice. We don't have a large amount of money to go and start building parking areas if vehicles are being displaced. So it's a good tool for us to have, but it's not one we want to just go in and implement overnight without thinking about the implications. I think I can guarantee if we went in and implemented this everywhere where it was needed, your inboxes would be full about people complaining about they can't park their car anywhere safely, and we'd be wanting additional investment in parking areas, which at this moment in time we couldn't resource or prioritise. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thanks very much. Sorry, come back, David.
Sorry, I didn't mean the report was negative. I think there's just the negativity from a point of view of what can actually be done. I appreciate that it's a hard sell and it's a hard thing that it's been landed on us, and because of that expectation that we're going to get from people when they see that, well, why is the council not enforcing this? That's all, thanks.
Okay, thanks. Jerry Convery, Councillor Convery.
Thanks, Chair.
Process that's going on.
Thanks, Chair. I've listened to Colin speak. You keep talking about the Murray, and you know my views on the whole thing. Softly, softly is at the door. As far as I'm concerned, and I know it's difficult, but I just take 3-1. They've spent hours and hours in the Scottish Parliament discussing this. Now we've got an act. Let's enforce that act, because part 6 and the background, it's quite simplistic. National ban on pavement parking, double parking and parking, and this is my big bugbear, at drop curbs. We put in thousands of drop curbs and you get these clowns, and that's what they are, clowns, that just park right over them. I would take the hard approach, and I would not care who I upset, because pavements are for, by its very definition, it's not a place where we'll have it half on and half off, because we get into all this nonsensical claptrap. The bottom line's quite simple. Pavements are for people to walk on, for prams to be pushed along, for wheelchairs to go along, for disabled people to go along. They're no for people to park in, and it's an easy cop-out. Well, we don't want to upset this one, because maybe upset that one. That's what it's for. We put in drop curbs, and I've watched it, and there's a guy not too far from where I live, and he parks every night right at the drop curb, and I see folk with prams and wheelchairs going onto a main road so they can access to get back on. That's got to stop. So there's no use us putting through powers in parliaments if we don't enact it, and I'm glad it's coming to us, and as people have said in the past through this debate, let's enforce it. And if the folk that don't like it getting fined, well, maybe they'll start being grown-up adults and behave correctly. Thanks.
Colin, do you want to come back on that?
I'll give it a go. I think the... I think all we're saying just now is, and one of the paragraphs earlier when we talk about when we're able to do effective enforcement, so going in and doing it properly. All we're saying just now is we need to do it in a balanced way, so the paper doesn't suggest that we're not going to enforce ever. All we're saying just now is once we get to hand to understand what it says, what the detail are, there will be some areas, despite what you're saying, Councillor Convery, which we will really struggle to enforce it 100% without sterilising some towns or villages or whatever. I'm hoping they are few and far between, and we will be able to tackle the exact points that you're talking about. So all we're talking about just now is between now and effective enforcement, taking it easy, being pragmatic, listening to what members are telling us, what no doubt community groups will be telling us as well, learning from across Scotland what's working and what isn't working. Some councils in Scotland don't even have a parking unit. They have no powers, they have no ability to enforce. We're at least in a better position that we can do it. But being in that position, having that knowledge about enforcement that we've had over the last 20 years, we just know we need to go in softly, but that doesn't mean no enforcement. And if there's any areas that are particularly challenging, then we could go in. The paper does say there, and I think the national campaign is from the 11th of December, we can enforce it, and we should be in a position to be able to do so if that is the answer to that particular problem. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thanks. I think perhaps Ross Gowland wanted to come back in. I don't know if I cut you off at an earlier point, but Ross.
Yeah, just briefly, I mean, at the moment, inspectors, I believe, don't come to an area unless there's double yellow lines there. And they won't do anything to an area unless there's double yellow lines or people are parking on double yellow lines. But there's lots of areas where there's people park on pavements where there's not double yellow lines. Does this make any difference? This paper, will it give us further enforcement?
Colin?
Thanks, Chair. Currently, we do kind of ask our parking attendants to attend areas largely to enforce the restrictions that are there, so yellow and double yellow lines, single yellows, doubles, loading blips, etc. They wouldn't normally go to a town or village that doesn't have any. Clearly, this doesn't require TROs to be in place. It's overnight, there's essentially going to be a national ban, so they currently don't routinely go to these areas, but these are the things that we're going to have to start to tackle. Clearly, we know areas where there will be a greater, level of what's the word I'm looking for? Going against the legislation. But if there's towns and villages down in your area, Councillor, then let us know if there's particular areas you want us to tackle. Then we can look to deploy parking attendants down there. I would stress though that I would a degree of caution about using this tool too quickly, being the first to use it until we fully understand exactly what the implications are going to be. Because for every one person that's complaining about that car parked outside, somebody will equally complain about they can't get their car parked. And that's not to say we shouldn't tackle it, but I think there'll be some priority areas that we should focus on in the first instance. Where those are, I don't yet know. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. I think that's all the questions. Just in summation, it's been, I think, a good debate and one well worth having. But I think it's fraught with difficulties, this particular legislation. A bit like speeding or zigzags, isn't it? You don't stop everybody speeding. You don't stop everybody parking on zigzags. What you hope to do is get an improvement in the position, reduce the average speed, reduce the dangers, etc., and take it forward in that way. Now, this is much more complicated because it arises in a whole series of different areas. And there's got to be an element of expectation management, it seems to me, on this one. And I actually think that we've got to have an element in practical terms, whether that's publicised to the public or not, I don't know, about priority areas where, maybe main roads, maybe school accesses or the like, where there are, significant danger elements which we want particularly to tackle. And maybe these are things we're going to have to go at first of all. And I think also that the other thing we don't need to lose track of is the whole issue of funding. Because this is, again, as Jerry says, it's an act of the Scottish Parliament. They need to bring up the funding to go with it, and it's got to be funding which is adequate for what we're going to require, accepting we're going to take some income in terms of penalties and so forth. So I think we're all of that. But the final point to come back to is really the point that both Jerry and John made, which is that the legislation has got a point. It's designed to improve public safety and to try and make the default position one where people do not park on pavements. But I think the reality is we've got a number of areas, like, for example, parts of Croftfoot in Rutherglen or other areas I can think of across the area where it's very, very difficult in practical terms for the normal community existence to continue without there being an element of parking on pavements. And that's where the big challenges, I think, are going to come on that one. Anyway, let's leave it there just now. As I said, it's something of an interim report. It's going to come back to us at a later point, I think, once we know a bit more about the detail of it. And can I, for the moment, just ask you to approve the report? Can I move the report?
I second it.
Thank you very much. That report's approved. Moving on to the item 11. Lost track of where we were here in the excitement of the last report. The update of the Community and Enterprise Resources Risk Register and the Risk Control Plan, pages 119 to 140. And that's back to Alison again.
Thank you. This report presents an update on the Risk Register and risk control actions for community and enterprise resources. The Risk Register ensures that the resource is fully aware of its top risks, that these are prioritised and controls are in place. The Resources Risk Register has been reviewed with the main changes being set out, and I'll just highlight these quickly. The 4 new council top risks have been added, which are that the council fails to deliver the outcomes of the economic strategy, the implications of the fire and rescue service unwanted fire alarm signal policy, inability to maintain infrastructure assets and property safely and in a well-maintained condition, and the disruption of industrial action. In addition, the top risk of increasing levels of adverse weather has been expanded to cover potential damage to council properties and housing stock. The scoring of the Council's top risk relating to statutory and legislative duties has been reduced for community and enterprise resources.
Sorry, that was me. I cut.
The Council's risk around statutory and legislative duties has been reduced for community and enterprise due to an improved workforce position within environmental services. 2 economic development risks covering external funding and derelict and contaminated land have been merged. And finally, the EU exit risk has been removed, but instead replaced by a medium score covering market and provider capacity. Over the last year, work has progressed to mitigate insurance hotspots, specifically in relation to property, vehicle and combined liability. The risk profile is set out in Table 2. A completion of the risk controls is set out in Table 3. And it's also worth highlighting that within community and enterprise resources, there are 25 partnerships, of which 5 are considered to be high risk. And with that, I just turn back to the recommendation in paragraph 2.1, which asks committee to approve the current position with regards to the resource risk register, and also that the risk control actions are noted. Thank you.
Any questions? Any questions on this report? In that case, can I move the report
I'll second
and ask the
it.
committee to approve it? Thank you very much. Item 12, the Community and Enterprise Resources Notification of Contracts Awarded 1st October 22 to 31st March 23, pages 141 to 146. David Booth.
Thank you very much, Chair. In line with the Council's standing orders, this report notifies committee of all contracts awarded by Community Enterprise Resources during the period of 1st of October 2022 to 31st of March 2023. To that end, a full list of the contracts awarded during that period on the basis of the lowest offer and most economically advantageous offer submitted is provided in Appendix 1 of the report. With that, I refer back to the recommendation of the report and ask that the details of the contracts awarded be noted by committee. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Any questions on that report? I don't see any questions. Can I therefore move the report
I second it.
and ask the committee to approve the report? Item 13, urgent business. There isn't any urgent business today, so with that, can I thank you for your attendance and bring the meeting to an end. Thank you very much.